My name is Monet Bonner.
I wrote the first, and as far as I know, only article on copyright in the music industry and reparations way back in 2008. Like a lot of my scholarship, which I've been doing now over 20 years, it sat on the shelf, so to speak. And then something funny happened. In 2020, we had the horrific murder of George Floyd. And when 2020 hit, I also moved up here to LA from San Diego, where I've been teaching. I teach at Southwestern Law School. I have a whole bunch of students here. Stand if you're one of my students. This is our future, by the way. That's why I do this work. That's why I do this work. Suddenly, I became the go-to person. And suddenly, doors that had been closed to me were suddenly open. Wow. Including being invited to speak 3 times here at USC. They'd never invited me before. All about my work, which connects race and gender issues, because black women are women and they're black, and you can't discount that, right? You can't really separate that. And how, really, just like all the rest of our society, as critical race theory has taught, that you cannot separate the law from the society that it exists in. And it gets worse than that, because unfortunately a lot of IP law, particularly copyright law, it couldn't have been better designed to disadvantage African Americans based on how they create. So my work was doing all of that. It all started in a barbershop in the Bronx. There's my cousin Sonny in the Bronx, my Bronx cousin. And I thought about that as a kid because, you know, black people aren't stupid. We knew that there was something horribly wrong with the system. And when I testified, and I don't want to take up too much time, thanks to Kamilah Moore, my pitch wasn't a fire-breathing, burn the house down pitch, because I actually want to get something done, and I believe there's a place for that too. We needed Malcolm X as well as MLK. But my pitch to the industry was, look, they love money more than anything else. And if you would simply desegregate this industry, do the right thing, pay out the massive amounts, and here's the main thing I want to take away. All music from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and beyond is still under copyright. And we know that most of those artists never got paid, not to mention the composers and the performers. And meanwhile, Wall Street is literally making a multi-billion-dollar deal a day on all of that music. So people used to say, well, that's an old issue. Go you back in 1950. No, all that 1950 music is still monetized. And that is why reparations, the strongest case for reparations, from an evidentiary basis, is in the entertainment industry. I have now concluded my opening statement.
Another powerful opening statement, because it couldn't be more true that you cannot separate the law from society. That is such a powerful opener. Now, question for Dr. Logan Westbrooks. During the 1960s, black musicians and executives still had a difficult time breaking into the mainstream of the music industry. And despite the commercial success of black music produced by the independent labels, major record companies, with the exception of Decca, who did not invest in it, however, a group of pioneering black music industry executives, managers, disc jockeys, and promoters began opening new doors for African American artists. You were one of these pioneering executives, and your personal collection is held by the Archives of African American Music and Culture at Indiana University Bloomington. This covers the state of music industry from the mid-1960s to the 1980s, which is often described as the golden age for black popular music. You are a former music executive, and your resume includes Source Records, CBS, Mercury, Capitol, and more. You were instrumental in the careers of Sly and the Family Stone, Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers, Carlos Santana, the Jackson 5, Earth, Wind and Fire, Miles Davis, Nelly, and many more. Now, our question is, were artists fairly compensated for their intellectual property during the golden age of black popular music? And if not, what can be done to fairly compensate their estates now?
Good question, but number one, I'm really just sitting here and I'm just in awe over Kevin Greene. In my latest latest book, I'm just meeting him, but in my latest book, I think it's maybe about a year ago that I wrote that book. And in that book, I never even met this guy, but in that book, I'm going to read you an excerpt from what I included in my book. On page 188 in this book here, How 101. And this excerpt, I have a copy for each one of you that's back before we leave. But it says this, it's very important. It has finally been publicly acknowledged just how much black artists have been cheated out of royalties for their original work and creative contributions to the music industry. Another industry that often overexploited and underpaid black artists, writers, and producers. But in recent years, there is a glimmer of hope. Kevin J. Greene, attorney and professor of contract music law and entertainment law at South Washington Law School in Los Angeles, has promoted reparations for black artists who were denied fair compensation because of legal but unjust business practices. And it's several other paragraphs, but it's a copy of the book I'm reading. But I ran across this and I wrote it and I put it included in that book. And you know, man, I just admire you for the work you do. Now the question comes up. You have all of these high-powered attorneys on this panel, and they are awesome. I mean, I am just honored to be in their presence. And Logan Westbrooks comes along from the music industry. How does this apply? How does it all tie in? So just briefly, just a little bit about the black music industry in the 60s. In the 60s, record companies, these major record companies, they had one black individual that they called their promotion manager. And this one black individual was responsible for covering the entire country. So every black artist that was on that label, this one black individual was responsible for securing airplay. That was in the 60s. And then as I came along, I entered the music business in the late 60s as a management trainee at RC Victor there in Des Plaines, Illinois. And as a management trainee, I was working in the various areas of the company. And I ended up just a fluke in the record division. Just a fluke, because they distributed records. They distribute the home entertainment centers. They distribute Whirlpool washers and dryers. So I ended up in the record division. And this was the beginning of the 8-track tape. Some of you may remember that. So as a trainee in that division, I was given that assignment to open up accounts for them to sell 8-track tapes. Now, in working in that division, I was working with Elvis Presley and his music. And on the black side was Sam Cooke. Now, even then, it was just so unjust. Elvis Presley, for instance, they put his car out on tour to promote and sell his records. Sam Cooke was on that label, nothing at all. I was right there, I experienced it. Now, as we move on, I moved over into the sales division as a sales manager at Capitol Records. Now I'm calling on retail outlets. Now the major difference in the promotion and the sales of those various artists. Let's take Glenn Campbell, for instance, who was one of the artists whose records that I was selling as a retail salesperson to the various record outlets. We had all kinds of posters, radio time buys, all kinds of things to promote and to sell that product. Cannonball Adderley, Nancy Wilson, no poster, no radio time buys. Lou Rawls, same thing. So it was just a difference in the black artists and the white artists, even at that level. Then as I moved on further into the music industry, in other levels, in other companies, it was exactly the same thing. And it didn't change It didn't change in for me until I became a head of the department at CBS Records in New York. Then I had a budget, and the acts that I was working with, I could promote them the way that they should be promoted. Acts such as Harold Melvin and the Lunas, O.J., Billy Hall, and I had the bucks, because the company was committed, I had the bucks, and I was able to do that. Then it came gold record after gold record as a result of that, which meant there was more money in the pockets of those artists. But now that first question, were those artists properly played? No, they weren't. They weren't then, and they are not now. And it's going to continue. And I am charging you, you young artists, you young lawyers out there, it's going to be your responsibility to go into those courts of law and to argue those cases and to make the difference for the actions coming behind us, so that they will be properly recognized and they will get the monies that they deserve. Now, I look at this as something that should take on the proportion of a marshal. You remember the marshal? No, what I was saying. You remember the Marshall Act after World War II, and the monies that was devoted. They reconstructed the entire, all of Europe. That's what they did. It's going to take those kinds of monies to reward all those things that have been stolen from us as black people. They have done it in the past. Also, I mentioned John F. Kennedy. The monies that were devoted to the space program. Those kinds of bucks. That's what's going to be needed. And it was one more that I mentioned. Eisenhower, yes, yes. That highway system that stretches from one end of the country to the other. It's those kinds of bucks and that kind of a commitment. And also, it can't be like the Veterans Act, where the monies was allocated, but they allowed the local officials to determine who got it. I lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and I can remember those black veterans. They didn't get none of the kinds of monies that the white veterans got. So it can't be that. So there are examples for us, for them to use. So it can be done. Thank you for listening to me.
Records.
I started working at CBS November of 1971.
History is happening, right? I hope you were taking notes,
The record business used to be horrible. When Logan was talking about what he did at CBS, the black music division at CBS, which used to be headed by LeBaron Taylor, it became so successful that they disbanded the black music division. I don't know if you know that, Logan. But the way record companies used to be operated, they would say things like, you basically get what you kill. So if you're making a lot of money, you get bigger bonuses, you get more money for marketing and promotion. And what LeBaron had done is he had signed Philly International Records, which was incredibly successful. Kenny Gamble, Leon Huff, some of the great songwriter producers in history. And they sold so many records that the most profitable division of CBS Records was the black music division. So then the executives said, well, we're no longer gonna have black music and white music, we're just gonna have music. So let's get rid of the black music division and all the bonuses and the money and other things that were going to the people who worked in that division. They did that for a while and moved LeBaron upstairs. He became a governmental affairs person. And then 2 years later, they reopened it and they had Vern Slaughter. Had Vern come in and be president of the Black Music Division. So anyway, I could go on with stories, but I'm gonna stop.
Two attorneys that haven't spoken yet, but that black music division, I designed that black music division at CBS. I did. There's also There's also a book that I have written, which is called The Harvard Report. That is the story of that black music division. Now, when that division was created, it was created for it to dissolve itself. That was my projection. Basically, we had black music and we had white music. The black division could not go into white radio to secure airplay. And the white could not go into black radio. It was that division. So the idea was to eliminate that line. Now here is what was at stake. Radio airplay. Radio airplay. Now, black music was only played on black radio stations. Now, you take a look at black radio stations at that particular time, the AM stations. On the dial, all black radio stations in the entire country was on the far right hand of the dial, which is the weakest signal in the entire country. Whereas in the middle of the dial, all of the top 40 stations was in the middle of the dial. Now, here we are, black music. What we want to do, we want to move our records from that right-hand dial into the middle for that powerful signal, 100,000 watts, whereas the black stations 10 to 15,000 watts, and they go off at sundown. Black radios go off the air. So that the idea was to move it to top 40 radio, and that's where that came about.
Wow.
You know what? We build on each other's
Okay,
backs. And that's what we got to keep doing. We build on each other's backs. When I came to town, all these wonderful gentlemen, Virgil, everybody here, pretty much, I had the opportunity to meet. And they were basically the builders of the groundwork that I stood on when I came to town. First, it ended up that to talk more about what was happening at the division you created, Logan, my sister happened to meet the guy that ran the division. And it ended up that his trajectory was he finished Howard Law School, came to California, couldn't find a job, East Coast, and decided that he was going to knock on doors out here, got a job at Capitol Records, and then he became a member of the Black Music Department, the very one that you designed. He had great success. He signed Natalie Cole. He signed People Bryson. He signed Frankie Beverly and Mays. The time was, as Logan said, there was racial division, and so they thought, well, now the black record companies are making a lot of money, why don't we do it in our company as well? And Logan had pointed that out to them. Larkin was lucky. He transitioned from Capitol. He got to go work for, during the disco era, Clive Davis. And then he got an opportunity to come to CBS, it's now Sony, and to, at that time, run the Black Music Division. Now then he says that there were only 4 million records sold by the highest selling black artist at the time. Anybody know who that was? Marvin Gaye. 4 million records. That was the ceiling, just as you were talking about, There was a glass ceiling. It wasn't broken. So Larkin said, okay, fine. Give me a quarter for every record that is sold through my department. 25 cents, okay? You know, I'm only gonna get $1 million. If I make $1 million, there's only 4 million records sold. Guess what record sold after that? Thriller. So what has happened was, as we know and probably are familiar with, there was the era of the fact that there was crossover. And that came at the time, the very time we're talking about, and therefore there was a great amount of records that were sold, and Thriller happened to be the one that blew the roof off. There was motivation for people to make money, African Americans to make money, so undoubtedly Larkin pushed that crossover. He had a reward. He also signed Luther Vandross, he also signed New Kids on the Block, he also signed, I could go on and on and on. So I had good fortune because he married my sister. So let's not forget nepotism. That helps a little bit, okay? Let's make that an institution. Let's build on each other's backs. When I came to town, It was that I was blessed by an organization that many of these gentlemen started, the Black Entertainment Sports Lawyers Association. About 3 years in, I got to go to my first conference and didn't stop going for 20 years. They were wise enough, they were careful enough, they were loving enough to build an organization that gave us an opportunity to meet with each other from a Wednesday to a Sunday, and they would impart knowledge that they had gained by Logan building the division and them operating inside the four walls. So they gave back. And so I came running along, I was right there. And I didn't stop going for 20 years. So we soaked in knowledge, we got relationships, and I saw the number of people in the industry build. So what has happened is that, yes, we have had the opportunity to build our skills, and also now there's been the opportunity for those skills to be deployed. I started out in the entertainment department where there was another African American in the department. After I worked 2 years, the mandatory, kind of period that you have to work as a lawyer to get your training, I worked at a firm, there was another African American lawyer. But the next two places I worked in entertainment, and now it's actually been 40 years that I've been practicing, it was Greenberg, Lesker, Fields, Clayman, and Mockdinger. Well, guess who was their biggest client? Michael Jackson. That was the time on the Dangerous tour. There were 100 lawyers at that law firm. I guess my hair was curly enough that they thought I was Jewish. They were loving enough to build an organization that gave us an opportunity to meet with each other from a Wednesday to a Sunday, and they would impart knowledge that they had gained by Logan building the division and them operating inside the four walls. So they gave back. And so I came running along, I was right there. And I didn't stop going for 20 years. So we soaked in knowledge, we got relationships, and I saw the number of people in the industry build. So what has happened is that, yes, we have had the opportunity to build our skills, and also now there's been the opportunity for those skills to be deployed. I started out in the entertainment department where there was another African American in the department. After I worked 2 years, the mandatory, kind of period that you have to work as a lawyer to get your training, I worked at a firm and there was another African American lawyer. But the next two places I worked in entertainment, and now it's actually been 40 years that I've been practicing, it was Greenberg, Lesker, Fields, Clayman, and Mockdinger. Well, guess who was their biggest client? Michael Jackson. Oh, boy. That was the time on the Dangerous tour. There were 100 lawyers at that law firm. I guess my hair was curly enough that they thought I was Jewish. So it ended up, because they told me that. Some people told me that. But I got to work on the account of the musician that basically blew open the door in terms of crossover. He was the biggest client at the firm at the time. More money was made by that client at that firm at that time than any other client. And there were 100 lawyers there. So like everybody's big house and handcuffs.
Oh, yeah, of course, yes.
It's just a couple of things that I had jotted down that I want to share with you as we are leaving. Probably, if I was one of those Baptist ministers, I'd probably say, I'm going to my seat after this. But anyway, there are two aspects about reparations that my response is based upon. One is from the aspect of business. Now, major record labels are corporations, and corporations use or exploit everyone. The nature of business is to make the most profit as possible. Number two, the second aspect is pervasive racism. Though business exploits everyone and everything, African American faced a double whammy of exploitation and racism. Number three, many white artists are exploited as well, but like most things in America, if white America catches a cold, African Americans catch pneumonia, primarily because of the added factor of racism. Now, I believe corporations plus racism will continue to work in tandem to try and prevent artists that were cheated from ever receiving preparations for their work. Corporations and racism are a cohesive team. So I charge you, you young lawyers out there, this is your responsibility, and we elders leave it in your hands. God bless you.
Thank you, and we're going to lastly get to